She looked so fucking afflicted, and I wasn't sure what she was thanking me for. Just being a dick to Jazz because he deserved it, or for letting Bella sleep on me. But it was obvious as I looked at Alice, that whatever was happening in that house was affecting her as well. I wanted to ask her to tell me about it as she gripped her black hair, and stared down at her food distractedly. To explain that, so I could find a way to fix it as I held Bella tightly, and listened to her snores, but I knew I couldn't. I was doing what I could for my girl as I allowed her this one peaceful hour of undisturbed rest. And Alice had her own motherfucker for that. He just wasn't doing that shit right. So I sent another pointed look to Jess. And I wasn't sure if he'd get it, but I tried anyways. Comfort your girlfriend, you insensitive fucking prick. He blinked at me with a blank expression. Because that was a new one coming, from the likes of Edward Cullen. I darted my eyes from him to her, tilting my head in Liza's direction, because he was looking all confused, and a little addled himself. After 2 blatant head jerks, he finally got my point, straightening up in his seat, and putting his arm around Alice, and rubbing it up and down consolingly. I wanted to snort. For once, he wasn't the knowing one. But even he looked disturbed by it. Eliza's mood and the way she looked somber and grim penetrated his usual calm and confident demeanor. And as I darted my eyes to him, and Rose, it became apparent that this shit was affecting everyone. It spread from Bella and me to the people who cared. I was being a dick to Jess, and Alice was probably in the middle of some feud at home. Emmett had to bear the tense atmosphere in our house between Carlisle and me, and Rose had to see it bother the 3 people she was closest to. This was some fucked up bullshit. Everyone remained quiet at the table for the rest of lunch. Maybe they didn't want to disturb Bella, or maybe they just weren't in the mood for conversation. Either way, they all left before the bell rang and I had to wake up the limp form hidden beneath the black leather on my chest. My girl looked around disoriented after I jarred her into the here and now. My jacket fell into her lap, while she rubbed her eyes with her little fists, and I just rubbed her back in circles, feeling shitty that it had to end so quickly. She yawned, big and wide, and making her whole body tremble as she covered her mouth with her hand. It made me yawn too, gaining her attention, as her eyes met mine, and she smiled sadly. Her little hand rubbed up and down my chest.
"How was the quesadilla?"
she asked groggily while stretching her legs out and flexing her feet. I brought my hand up behind her to roll up the bag. "Fucking delicious," I smirked, leaning in to place my lips on her cheek. I didn't feel it necessary to tell her I only took 1 bite, as she sighed and leaned into my lips.
"Thank you for that,"
she whispered softly, turning her face to graze my lips with hers. And that was my cue to stand us up. Because I hadn't really kissed my girl in so long that my whole being fucking ached for it. And I really hated to shove my tongue down her throat with such an audience. On the way through the doors, I tossed the brown paper bag in the trash, so she'd think I ate all of her food and enjoyed it just as much as she enjoyed the sleeping. She smiled, and drew up her hood as I put my arm around her shoulders, and led her out.
"I sautéed the chicken with red pepper and lemon juice."
She trailed off into a deep yawn, bringing a hand up to cover her mouth, and snaking the other around my waist. As she leaned into me, I felt a little guilty for throwing out her prized creation, as she relayed the saw technique to me in a barely intelligible half-yawn. Usually when she went off on these wild cooking tangents, she'd get that sparkle in her eye while she'd glance up at me, but it wasn't there, as she began explaining the intricate 7-cheese process in great detail, likely attempting to engage her mind while her voice was devoid of the usual enthusiasm I'd expect for the topic. I just nodded, and hummed in interest. Unfortunately, it sounded really fucking good and I was still hungry.
"With the corn tortillas,"
she continued, almost appearing to feign interest in her own conversation, as she rubbed at her eyes furiously with her free palm.
"a light brush of oil is what's really important."
She nodded weakly, as we walked slowly across the quad. She looked up at me then, squinting against the gray light of the cloudy sky as I tried to remain interested in this cooking tangent. Her enthusiasm was usually enough to absorb my attention, but she seemed oddly disinterested, as she curled farther into my side.
without the oil,"
she added in a grim voice, sounding almost dead serious, and forcing my attention entirely on her blank stare rather than the path ahead of us. She licked her chapped lips, never breaking my inquisitive gaze, as her bloodshot brown eyes penetrated and hypnotized me.
"The shell simply heats up and dries out,"
she concluded in a flat and emotionless voice. I slowed my steps and knit my eyebrows together at her tone and expression. It bothered the shit out of me, but she just shifted her gaze back to the path and kept walking, as if nothing had happened. I shook my head, breaking the trance her blank stare put me in while I considered if she had reached the insanity stage of sleep deprivation so soon. I was more than a little disturbed by the fact that the process of making tortillas sounded far deeper than it was likely intended. I just hummed and bobbed my head, deciding that the extra hour of sleep at lunch was what was really important. As I walked her to bio with my arms still kind of holding her upright, I figured this could be something of a routine. It wasn't as good as our old one, but it could still be a routine of sorts. That's the moment I could finally define what a routine even was to me. A regularly timed interval of sleep followed by various events and moments that are directly influenced by one's immediate cognizance and state of awareness. It was either really fucking insightful or a sign that I was going just as insane as my girl,